something is happening in my life that it seems like it's out of my control, but I'm the only person who is that common denominator. And I started seeking solutions. I said, okay, what if everything I believe in or know about is not true? Yes, I've created a different identity where I had a job and I did that, and you participate in this, but I didn't have the access to that alignment with the higher self.
Most people misunderstand trauma. From your perspective, what is trauma and what is it not?
So anything that we experience create those connections. And that's how, again, it's internalized there. And then we may process in the right way or we may not. And that's how we have explicit memories, meaning I can say, and I have some clients who are looking back and say, I remember my parents fought and I remember there was a lot of abuse, but it's often outside of their awareness how they really felt through it. And that becomes implicit memories.
That old Todd was dead. I just had to find a new Todd. And it takes time, just going to the gym, I am a fitness trainer, and people look at me and say, hey Todd, I want to look like you. I said, okay, but it's going to take time, right? If you want to get abs and get muscles and stuff, get strong, it takes time. Meditation takes time. Healing takes time, because change is hard. It's extremely hard, and you have to realize that you have to break the cycle. Hey Conscious Man 7 family, quick question before we start. Do you love the depth of these conversations but hate when ads break the flow? I get it. Ads can feel like speed bumps on a highway, pulling you out of that deep zone. That's why we created a way for you to enjoy every episode completely ad-free while supporting the show at the same time. For just a few bucks a month on Patreon or Locals, you'll get full access to uninterrupted episodes. You'll get direct access to me so you can ask me any questions that you have, some cool other perks like early releases, and you'll also help us keep bringing you the powerful conversations that mainstream platforms won't touch. The link is in the show notes. Join us there and be part of this movement. Ever look up and see those dull, grey skies streaked with chemtrails and you feel your energy sink? You're not imagining it. Something in you knows the sky isn't supposed to look that way. But what if you could bring back the blue? What if there was a way to clear the air inside you and above you? That's where the Chembo comes in. They create powerful orgonite, tools that generate orgone energy, the life force that helps neutralize EMFs from your mobile phone, your Wi-Fi, and even 5G. It's nature's way of restoring balance, bringing cleaner air, calmer energy, and deeper sleep. Every piece from the Chembo is handmade, from tactical tower busters to beautiful pyramids and jewelry, crafted with the precise ingredients to generate real orgone energy. And here's the best part. They've proven it. For over 10 years, they've cleared thousands of miles of chemtrails, bringing the blue back to the skies around the world. So if you're ready to take back your weather and your well-being, go to thechembo.com. Use coupon code CM7 for 10% off and experience the shift for yourself. Don't fear the chemtrails or the EMF. Be empowered with the Chembo and never feel helpless again. If you are new to this podcast, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and to share, because that helps us to be recommended in the algorithms. If you would like to support this podcast, please check out our merch store on Amazon with the brand Todd and Me. We've got some cool t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, and sweaters. Link will be in the description of this podcast. And if you're now starting a spiritual journey, you would like to start a spiritual journey, or you're currently on a spiritual journey and you would like some help removing some fears and traumas, please hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 and it will help you to get some magic mushrooms. Enjoy the show and stay tuned, because we have some more great content coming soon. There are moments in life that shatter you, and then there are moments that remake you. Today's guest has faced both. Hello beautiful and amazing people. Welcome back to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. I am your host Todd Cave, and today we're speaking with Alisa Gracheva, a licensed trauma therapist, a pioneer in combining EMDR, somatic therapy, ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, plant medicine, and spiritual healing. She has walked through childhood trauma, displacement, and the invisible wounds of being an immigrant, and emerged with a method to help others reclaim their wholeness. In this conversation, we'll explore how trauma lives in the body, the power of psychedelic-assisted therapy, the hidden patterns that control our relationships, and what it truly means to heal at a soul level. This isn't just theory, it's a journey into the human nervous system, the spirit, and the deepest parts of yourself. Buckle up, this is unlike any conversation you've heard before.
When truth is blurred by lies and misinformation, perception becomes reality. What will you perceive your reality to be?
Liberate your fears and walk with me.
Sit down and meditate. Connect with your soul.
Be a monster and then learn how to control it.
You got to be willing to do the work.
So it really goes really deep in terms of words and etymology and what they mean. So this is why it is really hard to really crack the matrix, because there's so many levels and layers to it, Hello, Alisa. Welcome to the Conscious Man 7 podcast. How are you today?
Hi, thank you so much for having me. It's very exciting, and I'm excited to talk about all of these wonderful things that you just described. It's an honor and a pleasure, so I'm ready to dive in.
Yes, I was very interested in you because, like I was saying off camera, when you had asked to come on the show and you had in your what you were written EMDR, I was like, okay, what is that? I had no idea what that is. So just because I spoke about it in the introduction, can you tell us a little bit about what that is, and then we'll dive into your story and stuff like that? Because I think that's quite interesting.
Oh, yes, absolutely. It's actually the tool that I started using within the last couple of years. I just got trained on it and I understood the magic and the power it holds. And so eye movement desensitization reprocessing, that's what EMDR stands for. It's basically from the trauma work in general. We always looked in the past, right? That trauma is something that is a mental process, but we didn't recognize that trauma resides in our physiology. And so by examining both, we're going to call it simplistically top brain and the bottom brain. We have the top brain where we make sense of things, right? We rationalize, assess situations, make decisions, but we also have this feeling brain, so to say, because from every experience that we have, whether it's something negative or positive, the neurons in our body fire and wire together, creating connections. But what we don't realize that the same connections, especially when they're not from the good times, create negative beliefs about ourselves. We get conditioned about life. And so from that point on, whenever we experience that, we start seeing life through the lens of that negative belief. Again, as kids, right, we can be wandering around and being curious and exploring everything until we touch that hot stove. From that point, we learn that we can get hurt and we start seeing the world. Okay, is this safe to touch? Am I safe here? Right? We start questioning safety, pain versus, having experienced that's something just curious. And so we get conditioned from those things that we encounter as children. And as we grow older as well, negative events create and condition our belief system about ourselves, others, in the world. So with EMDR, we are learning to go into that neural network, understand how it's impacting our current life, and then work on activating the brain in a way that breaks down that connection, basically going into unconsciously stored information and begin to open it up and process that into more adaptive beliefs.
Wow, very interesting. This is why I said, okay, I want to talk to you, because I've heard of many things. I've had many conversations before, but that particular thing I never knew about. So thank you for explaining that. But before we dive too far into that, let's talk a little bit about, a little bit of your origin and stuff like that. So before we dive into the modalities and theory, I want to understand your story and the moments that shaped you at your core. So when you reflect on your childhood and your immigrant experience, what is the earliest moment you realized your nervous system had to survive rather than live?
Wow, it's actually a very interesting question, because the moment I realized that I was trying to survive was just a year ago when I was 34. Because of our defense mechanisms, yes, internally, our system is very wise. and it always tries to protect us. And not always we're able to recognize that we may be living in a dissociation for many years, but we don't know it because we're dissociated. And so that's what I discovered, that my whole entire childhood was under this dome type of thing where it was complete hopelessness about where I lived. I was brought up in Russia, and I was born in Soviet Union, so it collapsed after when I was 3 years old. But having a rough upbringing in terms of financial situation, right? We didn't have a lot of luxury. We had to wear clothes after our older siblings. Per se, I had an older brother who's 5 years older. And I wouldn't say there was anything abusive in that way, but also we couldn't compare. Well, people lived in this type of thing, you have to be grateful. No, we lived very, very simple. And so having that, I think, I'm grateful for that experience now because it created appreciation for things that I do have. But at the same time, that kind of humble environment also didn't predict anything positive in the future. And so living in the space that, okay, there's nothing better for me in the future, that's a very rough place to be for anybody, really. So when you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And that's what led me ultimately to transition to another continent at the age of 18. There were experiences in my life as well that were unpleasant. I couldn't really form connections. And I think I'm just still grasping why what's going on. Because again, we always think that we know ourselves, but in reality, we know a very, very small percentage. And it's a beautiful journey of self-discovery if we allow that. Because if I say, well, I know myself, I may be missing important parts of information about myself. And so even right now, I'm still discovering more new things. And it's fascinating to see how sometimes we can think, well, this is just me, this is normal. And then reflecting from some shattering experience per se, we'll look back and say, wow, I didn't know I was doing this, or I didn't know I had that tendency. I didn't know I had that belief about myself or something else, right? So I think it's a fascinating kind of process. And my understanding of my childhood was when I was 34. And actually with EMDR, I started recognizing more of that. And EMDR and again, I've done a lot of healing on myself for many, many years. I've always sought out solutions and finding answers for my questions because I always had too many. And I always kind of creating my own philosophy about life and humans and the soul and connection with our higher self, God, universe, whatever we want to call it. And recognizing the physiological part of it that was keeping me hostage from when I was very little unfolded for me only a year ago. When I went for intensive myself. I'm like, I need to get the full experience of EMDR and know what that is. And it opened up because a lot of information is suppressed. And so it opened up the realizations about my childhood that I had no idea.
Wow. I would say that if you really want to know about yourself, the best thing to do is go to another country to live. You will learn so much about yourself. And I've done it twice. So I can say for sure that is a very deep and challenging journey, because when you have to start over from scratch in a new country with no contacts or friends, it pushes your boundaries to find out who you really are, So you've shared that trauma became unavoidable in your life. What was the turning point where you said, I have to heal this or it will define me forever?
Yeah, so back in 2012 or around that time, and I already lived in the US for about 4 years at that moment. And I've had a lot of very weird situations that everybody has experiences that are traumatic in nature or distressing enough. But I've had experiences back to back that were just mind blowing. Having to put a person in prison, having to navigate really severe abuse that I went through. It was just many things that were mind blowing. How did it end up being in my life in that way? But I was able to recognize the common denominator of all of this, which was me. And I said, okay, something is happening in my life that it seems like it's out of my control, but I'm the only person who is that common denominator. And I started seeking solutions. I said, okay, what if everything I believe in or know about is not true? And that started leading me to finding new solutions, to finding more answers, to being more open to see myself from a different perspective, to really understand in what way I could have participated in those experiences or creating those experiences. So that's where my journey began. I said, okay, enough is enough. I have to go and figure it out, and going to try to get therapy with a mental health professional. I figured that person could not understand me at all. And I've done one thing that a lot of people do when they go to one person and they say they don't like it, and they say, well, nobody knows what they're doing. This is all messed up. Like, there's no point of trying another person. But in reality, it takes time to find the right practitioner. I didn't know that part. I just put a cross on all of the other therapists. And I decided to go and get education for that as well. So it started being an interesting journey of self-education for myself. Again, I went for bachelor's for behavioral analysis, and then it ended up going much further, and I found my calling and my mission. But it was a rough experience to not get the help you need and having to navigate it by yourself. So I have deep compassion for people going through that experience now. And I love to be of service because I don't want them to be going through what I had to navigate alone.
You know, an immigrant experience is an interesting one because it really have to come out of your comfort zone in order to, form connections, especially if it's in a different language. So I completely get that part for you. So many immigrants carry unspoken cultural wounds. How did those early dislocations shape your identity and your approach to healing?
Okay. So yes, every approach to healing is absolutely different. And we have to always recognize certain cultural aspects, whether it's for healing purposes or even trauma purposes. Because we all have, again, now we know the concept of transgenerational trauma. When we know that we're working with ancestral traumas as well, that our family members had to navigate, and understanding that we're trying to apply the methods that will be understood by people. Let's say combining spirituality in my work with mental health is a very sensitive area because we all have different spiritual beliefs, we have different religious beliefs. And so navigating that with acknowledging the parts of how that human specifically understands that and how they can relate to their own spirituality. That's an art form because we need to, again, explore it in a way that will be understood by that person, but also still make it productive enough where they feel that that can be a strength for them to use in their therapy as well. So again, I think there's so many ways in which we have to understand, number one, how trauma was stored and created, and then what tools do we need to use to heal that? And again, there's so many different ways of going about it. So it's going to be a very personalized approach.
Yeah, trauma is also linked to fears. And this is why I always talk about fears and traumas. And the more and more like I have these conversations, I'm realizing that it's almost like if the entire system was set up to just make us have fears and traumas to keep us down, because a lot of us, we tend to have very similar fears and traumas, and they just go from one generation to the next. And I find that human beings are fascinating in the sense that humans are the only species and the mammals that teach their offspring how to have the fears and traumas that they themselves have. Well, the other animals is like if they lose like a lamb or a kid or a cub or whatever, yes, they mourn for a little bit. And then after that, they forget about it. Life moves on, But we carry these things, and then, we blame people or blame things or events or circumstances. And then we pass that on to our progeny. And then they pass that on and on and on. And then you could have a situation, you have 4 or 5 generations further down, have no connection back to the thing that happened, but yet still they carry it. So I find it fascinating that how humans are made and how we take and how we're wired. Yeah. Because we also teach our young how to be slaves because slaves to the same system, right? So yeah. It is a very interesting time that we live in, and conversations like this, I think, are quite important,
Yeah, absolutely. But we have to recognize, though, that, again, we also have those suppression mechanisms. That's exactly how we get the suppressed memories, right? Repressed memories. But that doesn't necessarily have to be. So we have the unconscious process of storing information. So I don't think a lot of adults is going around teaching their kids their traumas consciously, because that's how they live, right? So we function if we're not working our trauma. And like you've said, right, we have all these fears and traumas and it's to keep us down, like the society. Yes, but if we're able to heal that, to move through that, we will discover how impactful that experience of dealing with that trauma was. And so in my practice, my great belief and my own story as well is that at the end of it, there is a gift that you can get for yourself, even through the worst experience out there. But you can make it to the point where you look back and you say, wow, of course I'm not happy. I had that and I had that happen to me, but I'm grateful because it gave me this, some gift that whether it's our mission that we encounter, that we can provide for others and give this beautiful service. Maybe it's discovering parts of ourselves we didn't know we have. One of the biggest rewards for me is to see people acknowledging and embracing their own spirituality. Not religion. We're not talking about that. Some people can embrace that. Beautiful. But some people who are so disconnected because of religious traumas, for instance, I have people who say, well, I was traumatized by my religion. Okay, we don't have to go there, but let's look at other ways how spirituality can unfold, because it's not only under this constructs of religion. It can be, how do we connect with nature? How do we treat animals? How do we treat each other? How we treat ourselves? All of that is such an impactful way of looking at life, right? And embracing that. And I'm a strong believer that every experience is here for a reason. And if we just allow ourselves to say, okay, right now it's really bad and it's tough and it's awful, but let me see what is going to happen next. Let me go ahead and try my best and do my best and try to find solutions and look for ways to heal myself. And we're going to discover such a different world, and it becomes a blessing. And I always give an example of Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning. After Holocaust, he was a Holocaust survivor, and then he came out of this horrific life experience, and he created logotherapy, a gift for the world to find meaning in any situation or from every experience. It's a fascinating thing. So we can all do that. If he was able to find that, we can transform our traumas and what we had to endure and to make it into something so powerful and beautiful, maybe even a calling, maybe a mission, maybe, our own purpose in life. So even though, again, we unconsciously transmute that only happens when we're not working on our own traumas. And I think addressing that and understanding better of, why am I like this? Why am I having episodes when I act out of my integrity? Why sometimes I can jeopardize my values? Why sometimes I yell at people? Why I can be, there's so many ways in which our behaviors and our emotions can show us that there's something underneath that we haven't looked at. And the moment we start taking this path, we learn so much more. Is it easy? No. But it's so fulfilling if we allow ourselves to go that path.
The way you put it, it is very much aligns with what I say, where everything seems to be just like a lesson. And my mate has a saying. He says, first you get the challenge, then you get the lesson, and then you attain the wisdom. And it seems to be this process that has to happen, because I am going to be the first one to say that I have to agree with you where you have to have pain. No, like Lao Tzu said, pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice.
Yes.
I don't like pain. I totally hate suffering. But more and more I'm realizing through my own journey is that every time I was suffering, it was me choosing to suffer. The things that happened to me, they happened to me. And it is my perception or the interpretation of the information, the event or the thing that made me believe that I was a victim or at fault or I couldn't do anything. And then you create all these negative cycles of thought and emotion, which creates a feedback loop system. Then comes the suffering. So I think that one of the things I think we as humans need to realize is that pain is inevitable. We will get pain regardless, but it is how we deal with the pain that determines the outcome in the future, because our future self is created by the choices that we make today and consistently make over time. So, I think that we need to realize that we can't run away from pain. It will always be there, but it's about transmuting it, like you said, and using it as a lesson to guide us how to make better choices in the future, because like everything else, everything is a choice, it's a matter of yes or no, up or down, left or right. You want to suffer or not suffer? The pain, that is not a choice. That is, that seems to be mandatory. And, but I think it's just what we do with the pain, because you can get stronger from pain or you can let it beat you down.
Yeah.
So if someone asked, who were you before the world told you who to be? How would you answer that question?
It depends on which period of my life the world was trying to convince me of who I am, because I think I'm always becoming. There's so many
Okay.
parts of me that are always changing and evolving, and I think I even don't like, when people introduce themselves and they say, well, I am, let's say, licensed psychotherapist. For me, it's a very limiting thing. Yes, I know it's an achievement and it's a status or whatever the case, but I'm so much more than that, and so much more, because to get a license, you know what you have to do. Yes, you have to study hard. You have to go through that. I'm trying to bring aspects that are not even just within this field, right? That's something out there too, to make it more comprehensible. And I think exploring and expanding more of who we are. We are humans. We're pure energy in this constricted environment right now with our bodies, right? This is a sacred vessel, but at the same time, I love this quote that goes, we can either be a host to God or a hostage to our ego. And I think recognizing that, we begin to invite more of that energy of not seeing our life through the conditioning of who the world told us to be, whether it's someone who doesn't like you and said something that's stuck with you. Maybe it's your parents not giving you enough love, so you don't think you're lovable or not important, right? There can be so many different beliefs that can be created from our childhood. And I think going beyond that and expanding and recognizing so many different facets that we have, and using them interchangeably when it's the right time. Because again, we're not just, when people say, well, that's who I am, but who are you? Because you're different with your parents, and you're different with your friends, and you're different with your loved one, and you're different at your work, right? There's so many different aspects of our personality. We're multifaceted, and that's the strength. It's not something that say, well, you're not authentic. No, we are authentic in this, magnitude of different colors and shapes and ways that we relate to life and to ourselves too. So I would say my belief about me, I would say it's always changing until I put my brain or my mind at ease. During my devotionals at night, I think I'm coming back to the being of it, which if I describe it, if I give it a name, it's losing its significance, if that makes sense. Because the words always limit the experience itself, and it's the presence, the essence that we can tune into. Like you spoke a little bit about psychedelics, let's say, right? When you experience being the energy that creates planets, how can you explain that to another human who never tried that?
It's true.
So again, I think it's the experience of it can tell us more about who we truly are without using any vocabulary, any words. And so I think it's in the being that we can describe who we are before the world conditioned us to believe a certain way.
Yeah, and so I read that book, The Four Agreements, by Don Miguel Ruiz, and I read it like 3 times. And he says that when you're born, you're given a name, a nationality, a religion, and a culture, and neither of these we chose, right? They were just given to us, right? So I was curious as to who you were before you came into this understanding of you're this ever-changing being, because you came from the Soviet Union, and like you had obviously a belief that was given to you. You were given this identity, this nationality, like you said, you didn't have luxury, so I'm assuming here that one of the identities was like, we're poor, so it was a limiting belief. So I was curious to find out like who you were before you came into this understanding that you are everything, you are constantly changing, you are love, you are God, all that kind of stuff,
Yes. Oh yeah, that would be a very dark human or dark. Yes, I was, again, as I was growing up, I think the first time I started seeing any type of hope was when I turned to dancing, because I've always danced back in the day. I did, I think every Russian person knows something, either an instrument, musical instrument, or dancing or ballet or something like that. And so I've actually participated in quite a few different experiences before I went, and I've learned the stage, right? Being on stage and performing. And that was the only time when I started feeling some form of happiness and joy. And that was until I was 16, 17 years old. So that was pretty long time of not even wanting to live, not feeling like there's anything good ahead of me. It was a very
Wow.
dark space. And that's why now reflecting back, that's why I don't remember a lot of time in my childhood. And again, not because my mom gave me beautiful values. And actually, even though we were technically poor, I'm very grateful for my mom to never making us feel this way. We always had, like, we would always have a little bit of, whatever we need. We had the clothes to wear. Was it fancy? No, again, it was secondhand, most likely, right? But you're clothed, you have a place to live, you have all of that. But the feelings inside, I just lived in misery. And it has nothing to do with my family. It's more of how I internalized a lot of experiences that were happening, because how kids react to certain experiences in childhood can be very intense, even though it's not as intense. And when we're adults, we look back, it's like, well, that was not a big experience anyway. But how we internalize that, because again, kids are either responsible for the world or are the world, right? We're so internalizing everything. And speaking of our agreements, right? Never take anything personal. Well, that's not how kids operate. We actually digest and internalize everything we see and hear. And so that's how we create a lot of negative beliefs about ourselves, because not everybody has the luxury to have a good family. My dad wasn't present, so that's how it affected me in the future in terms of relationships too. And we're not here to bash anybody. And I think Gaber Mate talks very well about that in his book, The Myth of Normal, when he talks about, again, childhood traumas. But bashing our parents is absolutely irrelevant. We're not here to do that. Finding, blame and trying to go, we have to heal. And if we take what happened to us and make it our priority to say, okay, that pain that you spoke about, pain is inevitable. This is a pain. But if I will add the layer of suffering to that, saying, why me? Why did this happen? Oh, my father. If I will constantly bring that up in my life, I will, number one, live in the past. Number two, being constantly in the misery when that situation no longer exists, right? So yeah, my identity, coming back to the topic, it was a dark space. I didn't see any light. I actually was suicidal. I've tried to commit suicide in my life in the past, and that led me again. It was just a very hopeless place, hopeless existence, that afterwards I began to, I would call it dream, right? To have something out there. Maybe I didn't even have an idea of what that would be like, but I started having hope, and suddenly I began to again get into the dance floor, so to say, to the stage. And that became a beautiful new energy that I've never experienced. And I fell in love with it because I was not myself in there. And so, yeah, all of those things until my healing started when I was 27. So it took me a very long time to get to a place where I started to begin to heal on a deeper level. Yes, I've created a different identity where I had a job and I did that, and you participate in this, but I didn't have the access to that alignment with the higher self yet until I was 26, 27. I think that's where the journey began with that healing process.
Yeah, and the thing is that we as children, we carry our traumas with us through our adult life. And I find that trauma is often misunderstood. And to truly heal, we need to go beyond the story in our minds and listen to the body. So let's unpack how that actually works. Most people misunderstand trauma. From your perspective, what is trauma and what is it not?
Mm-hmm. So trauma is not a final verdict. It's not something that will define you until the rest of your life, even though sometimes we get stuck in that definition of it, right? Okay, this happened to me. And sometimes we get stuck with that trauma and use that as our story, because trauma will always be a part of our history, but it doesn't have to be the part of our story. And if we begin to look at it in that way, just like you've said about, again, having the story itself about that, so it's not it, but what it is how we react and respond to experiences that happen to us. And that goes for all of it, positive and negative. And usually when we're not able to, based on our core beliefs, based on our, again, sensitivities, proneness level, our family, our culture, our bringing, all of that matters in how we interpret a certain event that happens to us. And there was a study conducted in 2010. I know it's a little bit backwards, but it makes sense if we think about it. Our grandparents had many more traumas than what we do now, but yet we're more traumatized than they are, or they were, because they had thicker skin to navigate life. They didn't take these traumatic experiences. They had, again, I would say thicker skin and not having an ability to sit complain about it, to cry about it. We have a lot of free time. We have a lot of comfort in this life right now, right?
True.
And for us to grow, we have to solve problems. And I think sometimes people need to find problems to solve, and they create it out of the thin air. Not always, but a lot of people do, right? And so I think realizing that we actually have it pretty good, and then questioning, okay, how did I get so traumatized when I actually have everything? I don't struggle for nothing. I mean, financial difficulties we may have. My grandmother went through Leningrad blockade, being 12 years old with a 6-year-old sister. Her parents are dead of starvation in another room. They couldn't even bury them. There's no cats, dogs, or birds inside Leningrad and St. Petersburg, which is right now, because they were eaten by people. They didn't have food. They had a little piece of carrot and a little piece of bread. So giving that as a perspective, you look at us now and you're like, what are we complaining about? We're having it so beautiful, terrific. Everything is good. I mean, it's a perspective. Yes, we're not trying to compare, because again, people internalize things differently. And so right now, again, understanding that those traumas are for us to learn and grow and to become better. And there is a gift that expected for us to have if we go through this fire. We just face it, we go and we navigate it, and we learn something very, very important. So resolving trauma, I think, can lead to receiving that gift. And that's what trauma can offer. Because like we've mentioned a little bit, when we look back and we say, well, I've had a great vacation. I was so happy. I grew so much. We never have that, right? We look back and say, wow, that was an awful time. I've learned so much about myself. Like you said, getting wisdom out of that challenge lesson, and then that wisdom that we get, right? It doesn't come to us from happy times. We have to understand that. So like you've said, again, pain is inevitable. We have to have that, but it's not here to kill us. It's here to heal us on levels that we don't even anticipate. And if we allow ourselves to perceive it in such a way, we open up this box of conditioning where we live thinking we're victims. Again, I've been a victim in my life for a long time. So I can say I don't have anything against people being stuck in that way, but you gotta realize if you want to remain there or you actually would like to transition out and learn something from it.
I like how you framed it. Pain is not here to kill you. Pain is here to heal you. I have never heard it put like that, but I have to admit it makes sense, right? And it is right, even though pain hurts. But I think that it is a very true statement where pain is here to heal you, as long as you realize that there's a lesson to learn. And once you learn the lesson, you get the wisdom, it actually heals you, So what trauma pattern do you see most frequently in adults that silently controls their lives?
I would say blaming others for what happened. And it's a very natural thing, because a lot of things you can't even make sense on the human level, right? And that's why, again, I apply spirituality a lot, not in the way of, okay, prayer is beautiful, right? Not a lot of people can relate to that, but looking at trauma from a human perspective, we're going to be victims. But looking at it from more open approach, from different, more open perspective, bigger picture, so to say, can offer us something much greater, that gift, right? That wisdom that we can find. And so I think when people blame their abusers, it's the same as if you get a cut, right? And you blame the knife for all of that. Like somehow it happened the way it happened. If we get bitten by a snake, we're not running after the snake. We're trying to attend to the poison we got. So I think looking at what can I do now about what happened with me, and in what way I can start healing myself rather than constantly keeping this grudge on the abuser themselves. And I think if we let that blame go, that's number one level when we are transitioning right away on a much higher space and state and a new stage of development and healing that trauma. So blame, I would say, is one of the major themes that's usually is there with trauma or trauma work, and releasing that can give a lot of freedom.
So it looks like what you're saying, that we as humans, we hate to take responsibility for anything. So this is why we shift the blame, because I know that, like, for example, I used to be a civil engineer, and one of the things that I learned as a civil engineer is you must take responsibility. And the reason for that is that people's lives are in your hands. So if you fail to construct the building, the wall, the bridge, whatever, against the spec, if you fail to reproduce it against the spec, then people can die because you can have collapses and you will go to jail. So you are taught very, very young, early in your career, that you must take responsibility. And you can't blame anyone because buck stops at you. But I find that we seem to be really good at that in the job world, but we are not very good at that in the personal world, in our personal lives, where that particular thing that, especially like medicine, engineering, things that have life attached to it, you're taught in those fields of the consequences. But for somehow, we are good at those things, but when it comes to our personal lives, we just put the blame on everyone else and we don't take responsibility. So it's almost like a bit of a cognitive dissonance we have, a bit of a dichotomy that we have, that we are able to be one type of person in our profession and then a completely different person in our personal life. And the thing is that the personal life continues to get worse and worse and worse because there's no change, no transformation. So why does real transformation begin in the nervous system before it reaches the mind?
Well, experiences, if you mean how we kind of internalize that. And again, really quick on a blame too, again, certain experiences, we definitely know who is at fault, right? When we're talking about, I work with some clients and we're processing, let's say, molestation when they were 7. They can't take, their own responsibility for that. There's definitely an abuser that did something, but we're responsible on what do we do about this information now? And whether we live in that old story where we still, because again, who is the anger that I have is affecting, especially if that person no longer alive even, and we still live in the old story where we're blaming them and we constantly, like you've said about feedback loop, right? We have this thoughts and then emotions and then we live in this kind of circle. So allowing ourselves to release that and say, okay, I'm here and now. This is my present moment because the point of power is always here. What do I do from this point on? Again, right? Because again, I know some people can get sensitive about it since a lot of things happen to kids and they're definitely not the ones who would create that, but taking responsibility for what do I do with what I know now? That's our responsibility. It becomes that. And when we experience anything, if we think even about watching a movie, right? Let's say we're watching a scary movie. How do we know the movie is good? When we get scared, right? But it's not just mental process. We're sitting there watching, oh yeah, that's so scary. What a scary mask. We jumped out, right? We have this response of the whole body. That's where neurons fire and wire together, creating this kind of connection of something that experience wasn't like, wow, yeah, really, that was scary. It's not a mental process, it's a physiological thing. So anything that we experience create those connections. And that's how, again, it's internalized there. And then we may process it in the right way or we may not. And that's how we have explicit memories, meaning I can say, and I have some clients who are looking back and say, yeah, well, yeah, I remember my parents fought and I remember there was a lot of abuse, but it's often outside of their awareness how they really felt through it. And that becomes implicit memories. And that's the most important thing, because just like you said about other mammals where they just, they lose their, little cubs and then they move on and they forget that is the same defense mechanism, survival mechanism. And we've had that back from we were cave people, cavemen and women, because living in those tribes, it was not civilized society in there. It was very abusive. There was a lot of rape, a lot of violence. But yet, if you walk out of there, you're dead within hours. You're not going to survive by yourself. We needed this very abusive tribes in order to survive, right? How else can we really make it on our own? And so, but how do we the next day, how could we function after we were tolerating such abuse? Our survival mechanism, what repressed the memories, maybe not what we remember explicitly, meaning who did that to me and what happened, but how did I feel going through that? And so our trauma is going back, back to the old times, even like, again, the times of the cave kind of situation where we lived in those tribes. So yeah, that's how, again, understanding that every experience creates an understanding of ourselves and the world as well. If the parents didn't love you enough when you were little, then you will question everybody else. You will not know your own worth. you'll question if you're even lovable. Then you may not even go and connect with other people because that's your belief already. You function from that. You know you're not worthy. And so it can affect everything, but it's internalized in the system first and maybe outside of our conscious awareness because we just act in the future from the lens of that perception, but we're not fully aware of it.
You know, I'm really glad that you touched on the topic of like rape and abuse and stuff because I've had people ask me that question, both men and women, and ask me, well, how do I deal with that? Because they say that, oh, we chose our parents to come here, the experience is X, Y, Z.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, but how can someone say that I chose to get raped or abused as a child and stuff like? And it's difficult to have a response to that. But I think what you said just now is quite key in the understanding where, okay, it happened, but it is what do I do with that information now?
Mm-hmm.
I can't change the past. It is done. No matter how much energy, thought, belief, or willing, you can't turn back the hands of time physically to go back in the past, change the event to not let it happen. But what you can do is choose how you process the information, how you interpret it, how you deal with it, and how you move on. Because when you move on, then that is where the healing, the growth, and the love, happiness, and abundance exists, And I think it was I think it was quite important that you said that, because I think that's a very big distinction for people, because boys are abused as boys, as well, right? So it's not just girls that get the trauma, So for someone trapped in hypervigilance, what's the first concrete step to move from survival to safety?
Yes. So when we're talking about hypervigilance, and it kind of aligns with sympathetic dominance when we are in that survival response, because hypervigilance is when our body is not feeling safe at all. And so there is a lot of steps to working on that, of course. But first and foremost, it's learning to ground and learning to identify the real threat from perceived threat. Because a lot of times our past predicting how we view certain experience, objects, situations, people, animals, different things we have to do based on our past experience. So learning to be more present, our physiology carries it all. We cannot have anxiety and PTSD symptoms and stress in a relaxed physiology. Stress is experienced through physiology. Stress not, if I'm going to give you a bucket and say, can you please bring me a bucket of stress? Where are you going to go? Nowhere, right?
That's a good one. That's a really good one. Please bring me a bucket of stress.
That's from Wayne Dyer. I love him to death. He's one of my greatest teachers. He gave that as an example. And I was like, this is brilliant. Of course, we think stressful thoughts and our bodies respond with constriction. Why do we constantly have back pain, shoulders pain, lower back pain, legs pain? And with the EMDR, it's fascinating when we start processing, people experience pains all over their body because that's where it's been stuck, that energy, that trauma. And I've had a client who had very beautiful reaction to EMDR. He was releasing a lot. And he said, wow, I had a pain in my leg and I don't have for my life, my entire life. And he said, it's gone now. And it never came back. From the times that I saw him after that session, he said that pain never returned. So our bodies carry the trauma internally and keeping us on this lookout all the time. Because again, after trauma, we have a lot of parts of the brain that are not working very well. And not being present for experience, we get numb in the insula part. The hippocampus represses some memories that were traumatic to amygdala, the threat response, right? That shoots down adrenaline and cortisol because of a lot of experiences that boosted that anxiety. Now it literally begins to be bigger in the size and starts being hyperactive. So it's constantly shooting down adrenaline and cortisol. We don't have production of serotonin. Our body is always in a space of not feeling safe, even though I can be at home and I can be not feeling safe. So understanding, number one, understanding how can you make yourself feel a little more secure? What do you need to feel more grounded? And a lot of practices, because relaxation, any mental tools we're talking about, any relaxation tools and working with our physiology, all of that, they are skills. They're not something that I'm going to try once. People go and try meditation. They say, well, I tried it, didn't work for me. Okay, I want you to go to the gym, work out once, and tell me if you got a perfect body. Let's go. Chop, chop. Let's go. Try it. It's not going to work. And then people say, well, no, I work out 5 days a week, and they don't want to do meditation. I say, okay, why do you work out 5 days a week? Well, I want to get the result. Oh, okay. So you need consistency in order to get somewhere. And your mind is the biggest muscle that you need to train every single day. And because we don't see it, we don't pay attention to that. We can't expect change if we're not practicing anything new. I love one of the best quotes that from Albert Einstein: we can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. We need to have a new mind. And that doesn't come from doing the same thing. We have to try new things and challenge ourselves. And yes, it's going to be uncomfortable. I did not want to meditate back in the day when I started. It was 2018. It took me 6 months to finally, when I was, oh, that's where you go. 6 months. I did not want to do it, and I pushed myself to do it. It took me a long time because we need to train this part. And with these little phones that we have, with social media news, all of that, it's constantly hyperactive. I have people who are, well, I have ADHD. We all have ADHD because we have lack of discipline and we have the phone. And we go on the doom scroll, and what do you think that does to your brain? So people don't kind of put things in perspective, and then they're surprised that meditation one time is not working for them. Of course it's not. It doesn't work if you don't work it. So understanding that whatever we're trying to work on, even hypervigilance per se, coming back to the topic, we will need to use a lot of that. And there's so many skills. And when people say, I've tried it all. No, you didn't. Because if you did, you would have been much better right now. No, you did not. And so that's one of the misconceptions that people have when they think they've tried it all. You have not. Because people change all the time. I love to see when people change. This is the biggest reward for me, for them to shift who they were into something so much bigger in my presence. I'm there and I'm witnessing that. This is the greatest. I'm not doing anything. I'm providing them with information. It's collaboration. But people have to take and do something with the information that they're given. Otherwise, again, I'm not a healer in the way that I have a magic wand and you're going to heal tomorrow. It doesn't work like that. I don't take credit for their success or failure because they're responsible for their own healing. But I'm here supporting them through that and giving them, yes, it's going to work. We're going to find ways that will work for you, because not every tool will, but we're trying to find the best toolbox for you so you can pull out different tools and use them. But you have to practice that regularly. It's a lifestyle. And guess what? It's never going to end until the last breath. And people, when they say, oh, I've healed that, I'm good now, the same tendencies can crawl back out to you and pull you back into the hole unless you are staying consistent with what you need to do, just like working out. So relaxation, ability to navigate mind, diffusion techniques, things of that nature, healing process, it's a skill. Just like peace is a skill, happiness is a skill. If we want different emotion, we have to work for it. We have to do something consistently in order to get to what we envision we want to be. But I have another quote. Not everybody came to this earth to evolve. Some people are here to show you what's going to happen if you don't. And so everybody has a right for their opinion on this. That's my view of life, and that served me well. I've seen people who that served well. If people have different perception of it and they want to remain where they are, it's their choice. And I'm respecting that. Maybe it's not the time. Maybe they are not at the place where they want to heal yet. And maybe they gain something out of being in that hypervigilance all the time. Some form of a comfort. Okay. Because it's going to challenge you. Change is going to be challenging. It's not going to be an easy kind of task. But again, everybody has the right for their decisions, their opinions, even their bad decisions. I've done plenty of those. And I own them all. I say, yeah, I messed up here. But let's work. How can I next time not end up in the same situation? What can I do differently? And then it's every day when I get into the shower, when I'm meditating, I'm like, oh my God, reflecting back on the day. I'm like, oh, I have to work on this and I have to work on this and that needs to be tweaked again. There's always things we have to work on.
I like what you said. Happiness is a skill. I never actually thought of it like that because skills take practice. Skills take time to harness. So it actually makes a lot of sense when you think of it like skill is happiness. Happiness is another skill Peace is another skill because you actually have to actively work on it every single day because emotions are fleeting, which means that they come and go. So every day you need to go fight for your happiness, fight for your peace, and fight to maintain the love inside of you because all of these are skills. But the thing is, I find that we have to have like different tools and different modalities in order to help us to get there, which is I like what you said, where you have different tools in your toolkit. And one of the tools that I have found really helpful is psychedelics. And many people fear the word psychedelics. Like I was talking to a girl on social media recently, and I just mentioned the word psychedelics, and she was like, I hate psychedelics. And, I asked her why. And she didn't really come up with a reason, but, I think most likely it's because of fear, because people think that you lose yourself. So, I find that these tools, psychedelics, can reveal what therapy cannot. And in my journey personally, they've played a pivotal role to who I am today. So let's lean into that cutting edge and the mystical. So you guide people through psychedelic experiences. What is the single biggest mistake that most people make after a ceremony?
Oh, I think, again, like you said, psychedelics can be a form of a tool. Again, there's not one thing that works for everybody. So that lady is entitled to her opinion on that. And maybe it didn't work for her in whatever way. Maybe she's afraid. Maybe she's not meant to use that to heal. Because I know some people who are just not able to use that for their own healing based on their diagnosis. Let's say schizophrenics, like people who are diagnosed with schizophrenia, they're not able to do that. And so we can't say, well, you're missing out on this tool that can help you better than therapy. We can't do that because there are different ways that they can still benefit from that are okay for them to use. So that's just one thing that I want to point out because, again, it's not for everybody. Psychedelics are a serious thing. It's not for everybody. But the biggest mistake is, in general, how do we integrate those insights? That's the question again, because coming back, let's say, from my own healing journeys when I went on it, I know that you get an insight, you get realization, you get a knowing, right? It's not just a knowledge, it's a knowing. There's a big difference in getting the information and also being like understanding that on a cellular level. But then you come back and you have the same partners that are pressing your buttons, your family members who are pressing your buttons, people on the street that are cutting you off in the same way they did before the ceremony. And then you have a better awareness of the new way how you can respond rather than react. But the choice is ours. I can either go back and start yelling at them and pressing the honk, and honking and yelling and screaming and cursing, or I can say, stop. It's all good. It's preventing me from getting in a car crash ahead of time. It's all good. This universe is perfect the way it is. If for some reason that meant to happen for me, how can I choose peace rather than my previous response? So I think for me, it was easier to recognize that and having that better self-awareness, but yet it was still my choice, whether I go the old route or the new route. And ceremonies are this, you get this epiphany, but integrating that may take a lot of time. It may take, for some reason, it's days. For some people, it's weeks. For some, it's years. I know people who've done a ceremony and never did it again for many years ahead. So I think understanding that integration is the most important part of the psychedelic journey in general, I think is the best start we can give ourselves.
Yeah, because my shaman says that the medicine just opens the door to what is there that you can't see, but the real work begins after the ceremony, the integration. Yeah. And I find that there are some people that have done many, many ceremonies, but they're no real different from when they first did the ceremonies, simply because they've had no integration and they've not implemented the things that they were shown or told, because you can't take psychedelics and not realize that there are things that you can't see that are there, even though you can't see them, that are real. And anybody that will walk away from a ceremony and say, oh no, that was all made up, is not being intellectually honest. However, I think that the real key is the integration part, the part where you say, okay, well, I was shown, for example, you know what, Todd, you drink too much alcohol, so maybe you should go to the gym and reduce your alcohol. But then after the ceremony, what do? I go straight to the bar and keep drinking. And then I'm like, but man, my life is just getting worse, man. I can't understand why it's not changing. But the medicine said to you, but hey, mate, well, why not maybe go to the gym? Why not drink less? But, you know, so no one can say to me that they have not seen or were told or received anything from a ceremony. But the key part is the integration and the doing, you know?
Yes.
So in your work, what does a plant medicine journey actually do to the psyche and nervous system?
Well, at this time, I'm integrating other people's experiences when they had the ceremony. Again, it's not something that I do in my practice. Besides the ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, that's something that I actually can legally provide. But integrating people afterwards and making sense of knowing, again, I think the idea of or an importance of really knowing about mental health on a physical level as well, right? Physiological and how trauma works. If I know the history of a person, it's much easier for me to help them discover why they've seen a certain things or received a certain concept or insight. Because everybody, sometimes it's hard to make sense of it or even knowing how can I integrate that in my life. Because naturally we have to retrain ourselves. Medicine is not going to do that for us. We have to understand that it's still going to be our effort afterwards to implement new ways, to create new habits, even new ways of thinking. Because naturally, in some time, those initial responses to the medicine will fade away. We're not going to have, if you think back about some of the ceremonies, yes, I remember mentally how powerful that was, but experientially, I may not be able to fully re-experience how I felt through that time. But if I find a way to bringing myself to being more in tune with that state, and that comes from prayer, right? Regular meditation, maybe chanting, music, whatever we discovered in there that can help us be more aligned and more connected rather than, let's say, being in our phone, right? What do I do? And we have to always recognize that what am I doing right now is going to predict my success in a year. So if I'm meditating right now, what's going to happen in a year? If I'm working out right now, what's going to happen in a year? If I doom scroll right now, what's going to happen in a year? Right? And with medicine, the same thing. He gives you the new insight, the new knowing. You know, you may recognize who you are, but you go back to the same triggers and the same patterns, and you become who you were before the awareness, before that enlightenment. You begin to reverse backwards. We're always changing. But we can either participate in that and help ourselves to change in a better way, or we will fall back into the old patterns. Or life will change us even when we're going to get worse and worse just because we will change. And if we look back and say, well, I'm the same as I was 10 years ago, why are you proud of that? We're supposed to be different. We're supposed to evolve. We're supposed to change. And admitting, oh my God, I've had this crazy belief before. Now, thank God, I see it differently. I see it clearly. But allowing, because when we get stuck with a certain aspect or certain behavior, that's the ego speaking. It's not us as who we really are. It's that ego, that identity that we've acquired before, and we fought so hard to have that, and then now we know better, but we refuse to do better. It's like, no, because it's going to affect the ego. And it takes a lot of strength to say, wow, I was not very bright about that, but now I know better. So yes, I've changed my view on this. If you need to, apologize to certain people, do it. And I've had experience when I know I was wrong and I created certain things, and it bugged me for years. And I reached out to the girl that I worked together with, and I said, look, I'm so sorry I've acted like that. That was not good. She's like, I've never carried that. She's like, you're so good. Don't worry about it. I know you never meant it. But it was important for me to put that out there, to come, just like for instance, when I pray my evening routine, I'm on my knees. It's important for me to be down. Not because I won't, like I'm small or not, but to see the bigger picture. And this human existence is just a very short period of time compared to all of the lives we're going to live through and all the experience we're going to go through even this lifetime. This is a very small place so far. And understanding that humbling ourselves, I think it's such a powerful instrument. And it's so hard. It's hard for me sometimes to do that. It's a very human thing. And I want to present that, it's so easy to be all this love. No, it's hard work to not feel. We have things that happen to us that are awful. And of course, when we're hurting, we want to hurt others. That's a natural, it's like an animalistic kind of instinctual thing, right? So to fight that and say, no, you know what? It's between me and God. It was never between me and them anyway. And people will pay for their whatever they're doing. They're going to pay for that regardless. I don't have to do a thing. I know it's going to be taken care of, because probably something that I've done in the past, maybe last lifetime, is what I'm paying for now when I'm being mistreated. So taking that as is and saying, okay, how can I, again, learning, like you said about lessons, right? Learning lessons of not getting the same mistake or not doing the same mistake again. Learning new tools, new skills, new realizations. All of that will allow us to become something more. Let's say this year I've had it was an awful year on many, many levels, and I'm still integrating. I think it's going to take me a while to integrate what happened this year. But at the same time, I'm still going forward. Yes, do I get stuck sometimes? Yeah, because it still hurts. And sometimes I'm like, I want to, in my mind, I want to do something, about it. I want to show how I'm in pain and hurt them in certain ways, even if it's just mentally. And I refuse to do that because that's not what I believe in. That's not who I am. And I know I'm going to heal much faster if I don't have this negative, this contaminated kind of experience within me, emotions that are so negative. But is it a process? For sure. And some days I'm really not doing well. And then if I allow myself, I say, okay, let me find a way to, how can I give it to the space? How can I give it to my higher self? How can I come down right now? And I find a way to do that. Because if we're seeking that, if we're looking for ways to get better, we will find them. There's no other way. And it all depends on, again, how far we want to go.
So how did you realize that healing isn't just psychological, but spiritual, and that the soul needs to be part of the process?
Well, just like you, again, my deeper healing started with ceremonies. I have to admit to that, and going through that and experiencing that, for me, that was a breaking point in everything I've lived with, because I've had awful PTSD. It was just unbearable to live with. I went on medication and I got numb, and that was so good because I didn't have panic attacks. I was like, wow, SSRIs work, and I didn't want to give that up. And when I've heard about ayahuasca, and that was for me, okay, I want to try it, but I'm not sure about it. And then when I've connected with the place I wanted to go to, they said I have to be off SSRIs for about 8 weeks, or 6 or 8 weeks. And I said, there is no way. SSRIs helped me, the medications helped me with my marriage, my mental space, to be actually grounded. Like, there's no way I'm going to say no to that. And then my life is always weird. And then I had to go to the doctor, actually renew my medications. And when I went in, they did the blood work, and then they're like, why you did the blood work? I'm like, because you guys told me to do it. That's why I'm doing it right now. And something went wrong with the blood work, and they actually saw that I was technically had 4-stage cancer, but it was not my blood. And so with that, you can have internal bleeding and bleed out to death. And with those medications, they actually are bad for you if that's going to happen. You don't have enough platelets to navigate that. And they said that I have to stop medication. And after I stopped it, it took me 3 weeks first before I did another blood work, and like, oh, you bounced back, you're doing good. But I was already 3 weeks off of it. And I said, you know what? I only have to wait another 3-4 weeks until I can do the medicine. Let me go ahead and try it, because I feel fine without medication. And after I thought that I felt fine, it started because the medication wears off for a few weeks. And so I threw me back into panic attacks, awful fluctuation in my mood. I was struggling. So when I was driving to the ceremony, my mind space was, okay, I'm going to do it this weekend, and then I'm coming back, and on Monday I'm going back on a medication. That was literally that was my setting in my head. I'm like, I know it's not going to work. I'm coming back and going on medication. I know that works. It helped me before. I can't deal with it anymore. And that weekend was literally an exorcism, because I've done 3 ceremonies back to back, and I wanted to go home after the first one. I didn't want to stay. And then something in there, I started hearing the ayahuasca herself, and it was just, for me back in the day, that was so weird, feeling all that and, understanding all that. And then when I had that exorcism, when it was just mind blowing, I haven't slept in 2 nights, and that was the 3 ceremonies. The whole experience was just crazy. Then I came back and I sat after all of that was done, and it left me finally this horrible, I had not human voices coming out of me. That's how trauma can be impacting us. It literally was, I was struggling. It was so bad. I was like, call 911, make it stop. I was bad. And after, when the lady, she's still my teacher, and we're connected. I love her to death. It's been many years since we know each other. And I said, what the hell was it 30 minutes ago? After everything was done, I'm like, I can't even recognize. I was so uplifted. I was driving home like, I'm never going on medications again. That was from Friday to Sunday. Such a change in perception and everything. And so from that point on, yes, that was a miracle. I've had, I think, 3 out of all of my experience, I think I had 3 that were just mind blowing. Like, you cannot even comprehend how things like this can be happening to you. And other ones helped in different ways, but like really rebirth type of thing. It was about 3 or 4, I would say. And after that, I've gotten a lot of different skills and tools, and I started actively exploring. Sound healing came from that. Meditation started being a huge part of my life. Prayer, right? Being more in tune with that. A lot more books on that spiritual development too. So I started just bringing in. It was taking a lot of time. I mean, people think it's so easy. No, I spend a lot of time not listening to the music I used to listen to, not doing the same things I used to do. It's a lot of effort. And that's why I know what it takes to get to a new place, and it's hard. So if anybody listening to this right now who went through such transformation, I applaud you, because it's extremely hard to change. That's why I have a job, right?
It is true. Pretty much your experience in terms of the medicine, in terms of what you got, was exactly the same type of experience I had, where I had to face so many things about myself in ceremony that downright scared me, to be honest with you. But the thing is that what I realized is that I couldn't go back to being the guy that I was before. And that drove me more to continue the work that I started, because what I knew inside of me is that that old Todd was dead. I just had to find a new Todd. And it takes time, just like going to the gym. I am a fitness trainer, and people look at me and say, hey, Todd, I want to look like you. I said, okay, it's going to take time, right? If you want to get abs and get muscles and stuff, get strong, it takes time. Meditation takes time. Healing takes time. Even the work that you were going to do on yourself in your personal journey, that takes time as well, because change is hard. It's extremely hard. And you have to realize that you have to break the cycle. So what is the most profound insight you've witnessed people gain in a session that traditional therapy alone could never provide?
I think reprocessing loss. I've met people when I was in journey myself too, and witnessing someone else's journeys and processing, let's say, a death of a son or a child, right? Or a death of a partner. I know in therapy you can get there, but it's going to take a long time. So when it's coming from the psychedelic, because you are transcending the human conditioning in there, whether you want it or not. I mean, it's easier when you want it, but again, because you don't have resistance. But if you allow yourself to go through that and you say, I'm surrendering to whatever, and it's a hard thing. I know from my own experience, surrendering to such discomfort can be a very challenging thing. But yet I've made myself, my favorite part of it is getting well, right? It's purging. So I love that. It makes you feel so good. I don't know
You
how
like
people
the
are
purging?
afraid of it. I love it. That's why I
Oh my
can't wait
gosh.
for that.
Oh gosh.
Yes.
Like the
Yes.
purging is the thing that I hate the most, but I obviously you have no choice because you have to purge, but that is my
Exactly.
least favorite part, to be honest.
Well, try to love it. Maybe it's going to become a best part of your experience from this point on, because we have a choice. We have a choice whether to love
True,
it or not,
true,
if we have to do
true.
it, right? But I think when, again, going through all that and how people begin to be more in tune with their spirit allows them to process some really serious traumas. Because again, losing your child is one of the worst things you can go through. This is your kids. It's not normal. We're not supposed to be, as parents, we're not supposed to be losing kids. That's not how it works. That's not meant to be like that. And it's a big trauma for a parent for sure. And I've seen people making peace with that and going through that and integrating that into their life and having different meaning about this experience, maybe even meeting their, departed loved one, which is again powerful in another dimension even. So I think that type of transformation of making peace with something that's so unnatural and so wrong, and finding a new way of looking at that, I think that's the most important, or like the most powerful things I witnessed about from the ceremonies.
Yeah, that's powerful, because I think loss of life is one of the most difficult things. Loss of a loved one, whether it's a friend, family, I think that's one of the most difficult experiences a human will ever face in their life. So you integrate sound therapy, light work, and energy practices. How do these modalities interact with conventional trauma approaches like EMDR or CBT?
I love to do somatic work with people again, and just being more present with their physiology and learning to work with it, care for it in a different way, attune to it, finding different parts and other unconventional practices. Some people are open to it, some people don't. I use the sound healing a lot, especially when I'm guiding people through somatic work. Sound helps on energetic and cellular level even. Again, everything in our body vibrates. We all know that. Everything vibrates. Everything has a vibration. When we're using tools to help with incoherent energy flow, let's say if something hurts or we're anxious, our energy will be incoherent. And Joe Dispenza talks about it in depth, and I love his books and his wisdom on that. And navigating that. So when we have incoherent energy, then our vibration will say, oh, these are good vibes, right? Our vibes are not as good when we're in an incoherent vibrational space. And so with the sound healing, when the sound penetrates off the walls, it penetrates the body, shifting the vibration that can help eliminate even physical consequences of that, whether it's anxiety, stress. Sometimes people have headache, tension. I used sound healing actually when I used to work in the rehab, and I led classes with meditation and sound healing. I had the full setup, I had a gong, and I had the crystal balls and different other tools. And I've seen what people who didn't sleep for days, imagine you're detoxing. People didn't sleep for days and they suddenly begin snoring. I'm like, that's beautiful. It's extra instrument in the space, right? Or somebody says, oh, I don't have the pain in my shoulder anymore. I don't have pain in my back anymore. And they're fascinated by that, because you do get a lot of pains when you're detoxing. So witnessing that has been very impactful. I don't do the whole session right now in therapy just because I don't have that much time, but I've seen what that could do to people who severely struggle to navigate discomfort with, let's say, pertaining to substance use specifically, or withdrawing from that. And energy work, I think we provide energy in general when we are creating that space. And I prefer to have very authentic. I really love every person I work with. Love deeply, unconditionally. I have unconditional love for a lot of people. I would love to say for everybody, but not everybody. But for most people that I've ever come across, I do still on a soul level, I love them unconditionally. Sometimes my ego still gets in the way, because again, guys, let's face it, we're egos until the rest of our life. You can't just completely kill the ego and be in the spirit. It's impossible. While we're in this body, we're going to have ego, period. Unless we're monks living in Tibet, and that's a very different story. With this life, we're going to have our ego, and sometimes ego gets in the way. And I'm like, I really don't like that person, but I try to love them unconditionally, even though I don't like them, right? It can be a lot, but it can be a lot of work. But yes, energy, providing that space where I'm authentic with them, and I really want to be that way, and I want to provide them that unconditional stance. And sometimes I do energy work at home as well. After, if I know I have a client who is struggling, I would love to hold the space for them and do some of the Reiki energy, maybe just another type of energy work as well, just to help them navigate something, just sending to them some positive, energy in that way. So that's how my personal utilization of that is right now, at least at this time. But I'm really hoping to be able to return to the sound healing again as a practice, because that was something that I loved so much, and I love guiding people through that. I love the instruments, and it's just a magical experience. And we all take off as a ship, because just like with ceremonies, even sound ceremonies, sound healing kind of sessions, they can be very impactful if all of the people are on the same wave. If we're all able to really be present, we take off. It's a beautiful space that we all co-create, and all of our energies are contributing to that. So the world will not be the same without you in it, or without me in it, or without those people who are around us. And we have to remember that. And I think a lot of times we don't give credit enough to ourselves of being a part of this beautiful picture. And a lot of people, of course, self-esteem may be missing. So, but they have to understand they are co-creating this energetic change around them. And we're doing that together when I'm one-on-one or when I'm leading a group. So it's a beautiful experience.
Yeah, it certainly is. And guys, we can take a very short break here to say if what Alisa is sharing is landing for you, if it is stirring something deep when you've been ignoring, do something radical. Share this episode with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss a conversation like this, and take a moment to reflect on one truth you can apply to your life today. If you're listening on any of the podcast platforms, leave us a 5-star review, as that helps the podcast to be recommended in the algorithms. This is how real transformation begins, by noticing, sharing, and acting. Also, follow us on Instagram at Adriano_246, at the Conscious Man 7 podcast, or Todd Cave on Facebook. This is how we build a movement that helps people heal deeply, consciously, and radically. Now back to Alisa. So, healing trauma isn't only internal. It shows up in every connection, every relationship, and every intimate bond. Let's explore what that really looks like. What is the root wound you see often in adult intimacy and relationships?
Negative beliefs about yourself. And that's usually learned from our childhood as well. And again, it's not something that's conscious. It's something that it resides within ourselves, and we function from that. That's where EMDR plays upon. But again, let's say if I'm functioning from feeling I'm unlovable, I'm not important, not good enough, how do I show up in a relationship? You know, one of the things that people say often is, I want to find the other half, or my better half. Or who wants to date a half a person? Who wants to date that? We have to be whole and complete. And for that, as kids, we have a lot of different needs, not just for shelter, food, clothing, things of that nature, but also the need to learn how to feel loved, to feel cared for, to feel validated. If we don't have those concepts, if nobody's teaching me how to ride a bicycle, as an adult, I see the bicycle. Would I know what to do with that? No, because I've never learned how to do that. So if I've never learned how to feel loved, and then we have a partner who's trying to love us, but because we never felt love, maybe that can lead to unhealthy relationship, because if someone like an abuser trying to control was showing us that, and then we fall for that because that one need we could never figure out ourselves, right? We can remain in that very abusive relationship. Or the opposite, we can never feel enough for our partners as well, and that will impact that, because again, that creates different conflicts and tension in certain situations, us being emotional and going through emotional fluctuations. So I think one of the most important things is to learn how to fulfill those needs by ourselves as adults. And unfortunately, if we didn't have a good parents growing up, we will have to parent ourselves. There is no other way around it, but it's a hard work that not a lot of people want to do. And oftentimes we cling to those people, whether healthy or not healthy, regardless, who are providing us with that one need, but maybe lacking in other areas. Sometimes people settle for someone who is not good for them just because, let's say, they have an anxious attachment per se, right? So they're going to be sticking to the abuser because even though they know it's bad for them, they can't let go because they're afraid that they're not going to find anybody else. Maybe that's a pattern they had as children growing up as well. So I would say negative beliefs about ourselves impact relationships in the worst case scenario. And especially if we're hungry, I always give this analogy. If we go to the store hungry, if I'm really starving for love because I never had that, I'm going to settle for the first thing I see. I don't have a standard, right? If I'm hungry at the store, I'm going to Publix, whatever, and I see chips and I'm like, oh my God, that looks so good. I want that right now. I don't think about cooking for the week, healthy stuff, making a salad. I'm not thinking about that. I want this thing right here because it looks delicious right now and I'm hungry. So I think learning how to become and learn to be our whole self, how to become whole and complete without anybody else. And only then, because we don't attract what we want, we attract what we are. So the moment we realize that, and if we're whole and complete, if I love myself, I'm never going to allow anybody to treat me differently. I'm never going to put that substance in me when I know that I love myself. but we oftentimes don't love ourselves enough, and we don't know what self-love is. So I think one of the most important steps is to learn about those needs that weren't met and finding ways to be content and fulfilled and whole and complete by ourselves before we engage in a relationship. And not a lot of people are looking at it that way, because it's easier to settle for someone rather than doing hard work, especially if I don't know how to.
I like what you said, where who wants to date half of a person? Because it's true. Like, I certainly grew up hearing the notion of I need to find my other half. But what you're saying is true. You need to become whole first, and then the person that is trying to be whole as well will be attracted to you, because they also see that you are trying to be whole, and two holes just make two holes, right? You know what I mean? Because there's no halves in there, right? So how does unresolved childhood trauma show up in dating, marriage, or partnership dynamics?
Yeah, so just expanding a little bit on the same kind of aspect. If again, I haven't learned how to again feel loved and feel supported, and if one person comes, because again, let's face it, the first person we may be attracted to may not be the best for us. It's rarely that I see someone who said, well, we started dating back in high school. That was my first relationship. We're married, having kids, we're happy. I haven't come across that. I have only one example, and even then there's issues now, right, after many years of being together, because we don't even know ourselves when we're, kids, so to say. So I would say understanding that if I don't have solid, good beliefs about myself, I may settle for someone who may be actually very bad for me. But because I don't know any better, if I feel unlovable, imagine, right? We feel unlovable. And then I find someone who's like, I love you so much. You're the best thing. You're going to fall, in love quick, and not even in that deep love, but like, oh my God, I finally feel like I'm worth something. I'm good. I'm enough, or whatever the case, because I feel loved finally. But then they're beating you up later on. You're like, well, and I have people who say in abusive relationship, well, but when it shines, it shines. When he loves me, he loves me. Well, no, that doesn't work like that. I understand that you have good days, but he's abusing you all of the other stuff. And people just cling to this little aspect that shows them that they're lovable, they're good enough, they're worthy, and then tolerate a lot of abuse afterwards without knowing that they don't have to settle for that. But because a lot of people are also conditioned that, okay, nobody will love you besides me. And that's a lot of narcissistic kind of guys or girls can be saying that. I know women who do that to men. It's so fascinating to see how good women end up with some not so good men, and good men end up with not so good women. I'm like, can we just rearrange that a little bit? But I guess there's a lot of lessons for all of us to learn. So again, all of that is a personal, spiritual journey, so to say. But understanding that and beginning to objectively see situation, really assessing that, is it a healthy relationship? And if you have to justify something, you say, no, but look, he's doing that for me and this, he's paying for my bills, but yet he is preventing you from seeing your friends, and you can see your family, and you have to be home all the time when he's home. Like, this is possessive and controlling, and that's not normal. And if the person has to justify it, well, but he really loves me, and that's not love. This is not love. Whatever that is, you can be the judge for that, but this is not love. And assessing that, I think, stepping outside and really looking without trying to justify, just saying, do you feel like it's healthy? If the answer is no, you have to see what you want to do about it. Because again, we can't rush it. We can't force it. Me saying to the person, I think you probably should leave that person. It may not make a difference because maybe they haven't learned their experience yet. I'm not sure, So I'm treading lightly when it comes to relationships, especially abusive relationships. But most often than not, that usually stems from trauma in childhood, where they didn't learn how to evaluate themselves, how to have certain value for themselves, how to see themselves in a good way, have self-love, right? And they settle for something that's not good for them. And this, unfortunately, I've been one of those people. I know a lot of other women who struggle with that. It's a natural thing, but we don't have to stay there. And there is a way out. And so remembering that can give some direction how to move forward.
Okay. So what does a truly regulated, grounded person look like in practice, not as an ideal, but in real life?
If I will see one, I'll let you know. I think, let's put it this way. I think we are work in progress always. I don't know if, the thing is, let's say with women, if we look at women, a lot of times we have hormonal imbalances too that affect us. And we're not always going to be, I mean, it's life. We're not always going to be feeling grounded, but we're going to have skills to how to get out faster from those things that are meant to take us down. So if we have, I would say, grounded person, or like more or less a stable person, is the one who is practicing regularly. If you have a practice, if you know that I'm staying consistent with my workouts, I eat well, I don't drink or drink a little bit, if I don't use any, substances that are here to harm me or kill me, if I'm staying consistent with my spirituality, I attend events, I have good relationships, or at least working on creating new relationships, I think our routine can predict if we are moving into the right direction. Because again, we're a work in progress. So if the person has solid discipline when it comes to themselves, then they're building themselves up brick by brick. And one day it's going to show in different ways of how people view you. Because I have, again, sometimes it was very interesting. 2021, I worked in the rehab and I worked 2 jobs. I was 12 and a half hours in. I was finishing with my degree. There was so many things going on. I had divorce, I had car crash, everything was collapsing for me. I would cry going to work, and then I would, would be with my mom on the phone, and then I would arrive there. I would wash away the tears and just go and work. Right. So it was very, very difficult. And I've had a client who was sitting with me once, and he said, I want that, looking at me. And I'm like, what do you mean? What exactly do you want? He said, I want that peace that you have. And in my head, I'm like, what peace can people refer to? I'm going crazy this year. Absolutely nuts. And what I understood from that point on was that, because my practices were still in place, I was still every night in my prayers, my devotional, and connecting, rebalancing myself. What's been affected when we think we're unstable is the mind. Our mind is the one that keeps us stuck and in these loops, and we think we're in chaos. But in reality, when we have faith and we have ways to turn back to navigate this destructive forces of our lives at this time and day, if we're able to sit back, people sense that energy. They don't sense your mind. Yes, the mind can affect overall energy, but it's different if you do practice and if you walk with spirit, if you walk with God, if you walk with, your higher power, that's what people will sense. Mind can be as restless as, life allows, but they will be sensing your essence, your energy. And that can be very different from our mind space. And I've had actually 2 people that you're telling me exactly the same thing. And I was mind blown. And that's how I made that connection. They're not sensing my mind. Yes, I'm crazy in my mind right now. But no matter what's going on in life, I still have faith. And I trust the process that allows me to take my next breath, allows me to hear my next heartbeat. I trust that life will be changing in that way, but it requires regular practice to come back to this realization. And so, I would say that if we have those practices to help us realign every time, like a chiropractor, right? We realign our spiritual self and the mind, we will probably get to a space where we will be considered grounded and well-rounded. So.
Yeah, I think consistency plays a huge part in the role. And, it's interesting what you said, because I totally agree in the sense that the mind plays a lot of tricks, and sometimes this is why I say to people that how you think it is and how it really is sometimes are completely different things, because this is why I always tell my clients that you must lean in and rely on your habits. You can't rely on how you feel or how you think you feel or what you think. Discipline, consistency, and habits are the things that will pull you through. So even if you don't think you're showing up in the world, the act of doing your habits and being consistent will cause you to show up in the world, because you are still at a different energy frequency, but mentally you may just be telling yourself a whole bunch of stories. So the mind is almost like a trickster, right? So we must be careful with our mind and, the things that we put in it, So how can someone tell if they're genuinely healing versus just masking their wounds with spiritual tools or techniques?
Yeah, I think our emotions are the quickest road to understanding where we are. Because if you feel anxious, if you feel upset, depressed, hopeless, all of those things, you're probably not, you may be on the road to healing, but if you're practicing something, you still feel that way, that means something is not working very well. But it doesn't mean that you're failing or that it's hopeless still. You just need to look for another tool. It's always there for us. If I feel a certain way, that means I haven't mastered myself yet in that area. And I have to find, just like in Course in Miracles, they always say you can choose peace rather than this. And understanding that, again, it's easier said than done, granted. But at the same time, I think it's the road to figuring out the tools for us to get to that space. So if you're struggling with some emotions that are not positive, then there is more work to be done. But it also can be a part of the healing process too. It's not always going to fall into, if you suddenly out of nowhere feel great the next day, you're like, everything is fine. I feel terrific. What did you actively do for that? Nothing. I just felt so good. It's probably going to collapse in the same way you got it. And if you're not doing that consistently, if you're not building that every single day, even you're going to fall regardless. We're all going to fall or take steps back. How fast do we get to, again, walking forward again? It's going to depend on those tools we use and staying disciplined with. So it's working if we work it. And I have people who say, well, we were doing, let's say, affirmations, we work on gratitude, we do, tracking the thoughts and utilizing cognitive reframe, all of these beautiful tools, right? And they say, well, I feel so good. So, and then they're like, well, I'm not really feeling so good right now in some time. And I say, well, what's going on? What are you practicing right now? What's your self-care? Well, I kind of stopped. It works when you work it, right?
Listen, you literally have described the experience I have with my clients, where I will have clients that will get really good results in the beginning. And then all of a sudden, I can tell they dropped off. So I can tell by their activity in the app, they're not logging their meals, they're not doing all the things they should be doing, taking off their habits. And then when I have a catch-up conversation with them, they would say, oh yeah, I've been feeling a bit down recently. And I say, okay, so let's talk about that then. So what have you been doing to help you to not feel down? Oh, I just, been not doing anything. I said, but that's the whole point, right? I say all the time that when you get the challenging moments is the time you need to lean in more to the things that were giving you the positive moments and results and stuff like that. You have to double down on the things that were working, that gave you the positive results or the achievement when things get difficult, because emotions are fleeting and you can't rely on motivation. So what you describe is exactly what I have to tell them is every single time they stop doing the things that they were doing. Oh, I stopped doing meditation.
Yeah.
Okay, but I was feeling really good when I was doing it, and then this happened, and then I just didn't have the time to do it, and then X, Y, Z, and what's not. So, yeah, that's a classic. So,
classic.
So as we close, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture, the future of healing, consciousness, and the human experience. What do you see as the next frontier in trauma healing that most people aren't prepared for?
Oh, I am not even sure. I think there's so much right now that's happening in this world, and people take things so personally. I think we're fighting sometimes for the wrong things in a way. And again, it's not my journey. I try to, again, stay as outdated as possible when it comes to world situation, things of that nature, because I already have a lot that I have to go through daily, right? With people, again, I have 7, 8 clients that not coming to me with stories of success and achievements and things of that nature. I think, like you said about the 4 agreements, I think everybody should read that book for real, because again, not taking things personally. And oftentimes we take this as a part of our identity, certain views that we have, and we make it so big that we start going against people who don't support that. and don't keep an open mind about different views of looking at that. Because sometimes we have to realize, yeah, I mean, it's not the same thing. But if we think about it, if I like one color, you like another, and I'm trying to convince you that my color is better, the color I like is better, or the food that I eat is better than what you like, right? It's just a preference. But people begin to internalize that, make it a part of themselves. That's why, again, saying, I am a licensed psychotherapist. What am I if I'm not having that license right now? You know, and we have to realize people give themselves those labels that afterwards they have to fight for. If we step outside of that and reassess ourselves, I think it's going to be easier to deal with our traumas and not to acquire any new traumas in that way that, you know, possibly is going to lead me to if I have that label. I can't say what's going to happen in the world, but I can say one thing, that we're absolutely fortunate to know about trauma what we know now, because we know so much and how to deal with that. We have beautiful interventions, beautiful tools. We have unconventional methods like psychedelics, energy work, sound healing, and also conventional clinical kind of settings and methods that can be very useful. If we really want to heal, we just have to do it for ourselves, not waiting for the perfect time, because that may never come, but allow ourselves to explore different ways that we can utilize as healing, and start to reassessing ourselves and see where we stand, especially if we experience intense emotions every single day. And a lot of people can probably relate to that right now, because again, things are a little bit odd everywhere. I don't know if it's just United States. I think it's everywhere. There's a lot of tension. There's a lot of different opinions that clash and collide, and people just fight too hard for things that, and they're not even fighting in the right way, right? Well, how they fight is sitting on the couch discussing different views and ready to kill each other. That's how they fight. They're not going out there trying to make a difference. And that's recreating your trauma every time you're having this talk. If you feel like you want to do something about whatever cause, go and find a way to actually make a difference and participate in that, rather than becoming one of those millions of people who just sit back and have a big opinion while eating chips and watching TV. So we have to, I think, reassess ourselves. And I would highly recommend everybody just, again, taking that, you know, looking at yourself, taking that inventory and saying, okay, what can I do? Because there's always something that we can grow.
I think what's happening to us is that we're putting our focus and attention in the wrong places. And what we should, and it is basically a trick, because we should be putting the focus and attention on our internal instead of everything with the external, because the internal creates the external and not the other way around. And the external things that are happening are things that are beyond our control, but yet still we are giving it all of our power. And this is what's making us very weak and depressed and sad. And, you know, basically, my view is that we're having a collapse of a civilization. Like the planet Earth is collapsing in terms of our consciousness. That's how I see it. But when you look at the global mental health crisis, what is humanity actually experiencing at a soul level?
I think, number one, looking at everything that's going on, we can't just automatically put everything in the collapse of the consciousness, because yes, certain places and people and things can seem like that. But I do believe that there's always another side of the story. And I do know a lot of people who do work on themselves and are trying to get better. We just need more people on that side right now. So again, the more we turn inwards, just like you said, absolutely valid. We have to learn first. We are the conduit to change. We are those people who can change. Even if your presence can make someone feel safe, that's already a huge thing. You've done something magical, even though you didn't do anything, you know, on purpose, so to say. So if we turn to the inside and learn to heal ourselves before we attend to anything else, and not, again, internalizing the outside forces, not to stand and give yourself that label, because once you give yourself a label, you have to live up to that. If you have a story, then you have to live up to that story too. But just being in this present moment, coming as you are, re-experiencing yourself, like you said, go travel, take a break, go and see something outside of that. Get unfamiliar with the environment. I think that's a beautiful way to re-experience yourself. I agree with you 100%. But even just doing by yourself a new thing, go and take that extra skill, practice that new skill. It's still going to give you different energy, different perspective. Communicate with new people, go by yourself. Don't go with someone else, because if you're going with someone else, you're either a relative or a friend. You're already known. But when you go in alone, technically you are no one yet. You can become however you communicate, how you show up. It can be very different from what you normally are. I think that's a beautiful way to experience yourself. But yeah, there is definitely crisis in a lot of ways, but I have faith that there is still people who are trying to grow and get better, and I have to, because I know I am one of them. I have hope that there are a lot of people out there who are trying to do the same. So hopefully we're trying to equalize this imbalance that is perceived if we just look at the TV, right? News and media, we're like, wow, there's the end of the world is coming very quick. But in reality, a lot of people who are doing the work, they're not showing up there. And that's the power that we have too, is to avoid certain things that we know we can get conditioned from.
Yeah, I agree. And the thing is, I'm very optimistic about the future, but very realistic at the same time, because I say that because it is a balance, right? Like, I do think that we're going to get through this very well. However, I am realistic because of the conversations that I have with normal people, that they have to go through the same things that I went through and you went through in order to get to the same place that I'm at, which is not that much further away from them. It just means that I had an experience or a time of experiences that they have not had yet. So they don't have the level of mind that I have because they didn't have the experience. So realistically, for them to get to an understanding that I have, they have to go through more pain. The problem with that is that it's going to be on a collective level. So it's going to be even more challenging for the people that have, like me and you, have gone through the pain, because we're the ones that are going to have to be the voices of reason, the stable heads in the room, the ones that are trying to maintain the energy and hold space. So it's going to be another level of challenge, but I'm optimistic that we all will do it. This is why we have the show, The Conscious Man 7. But I'm realistic that we've not seen anything yet. This is where I stand. So
I love one quote that goes, Wayne Dyer said that no one knows enough to be a pessimist.
that's interesting.
No one knows enough. Yeah. We think we know, but in reality, we don't know enough. And again, and that's another cognitive distortion, where we just look at what maximizing the negative and minimizing the positive. Oftentimes we take something that hurts and we make it such a big thing. But in reality, there's so many other areas that can be so great as well, but we don't see it because we don't pay attention to what doesn't hurt. We pay attention to what hurts. And I think if we prioritize and practice, again, gratitude is a skill. If we practice that regularly, we will have much better mood, much better sleep, much better mood, and much different perspective on everything. So it's all in our hands. We just have to give it a shot.
Yeah, I agree. I like that. No one has enough information to be a pessimist. So what is one truth about healing you wish every human being understood?
You can heal. You're capable of that, and it can happen to you, and it will happen if you let yourself experience that.
Okay, and let's get you on this one. So if someone listening feels broken, lost, or too far gone, what would you say to them right now?
You're not broken and you're not too far gone. There's a lot of people, again, we have to get educated, on that. Not educated, I'm not talking about going and getting a degree, right? But read proper literature. Men search for meaning. If you read the horrors people had to endure in Holocaust and how people made it through that and recovered, you can too. We just have to, again, look at the examples. If someone else did it, even if it's just one person, then you can do it too. If you put your essence, your energy into it, your efforts. But not a lot of people are maybe ready for that yet. And that's okay too. But there are options. And if we let ourselves experience new things and turn to seeking new tools, you will find them. There are tools out there. There is hope and you can do it. But again, it may require you to start somewhere and start your research and look at how other people did it. We can't solve a problem with the same mind that created it. Again, this is a very important quote to grasp, because really, we need to have new thoughts and new information, new energy in order to think differently. We're not going to be able, if I'm asking myself about the solution when I'm this hysterical person who is stressed out, doesn't know how to navigate it, and I'm asking myself, what can I do? What can I tell myself? Nothing good. I have to go and seek others or seek other tools in order to navigate this kind of experience.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think that, where we're at now in the world is very interesting. I am very, very bullish, very realistic, very optimistic. But at the same time, I think that there's so many mysteries that we are yet to uncover. And this is one of the reasons which makes me very excited because, this podcast is a proof in that there's so many different modalities, so many different techniques and different ways of achieving the same result, which is healing, which is why I really enjoy conversations like this. So with that being said, please tell the lovely people at the Conscious Man 7 where they can find you, what work you do, if they want to work with you, how they can do that, if you have any book that you want to plug or anything, programs and all that good stuff.
Yes. Well, Instagram, Alisa_art. You can find me in Psychology Today, Alisa Gracheva. My website, www.sins.life. I would definitely connect with me. We're going to talk. I can give you a free consultation, anybody who is seeking. And I have actually a book that has been launched this year, and it's called Walking with Spirit, and you can get it on Amazon. So maybe it's going to serve you well for you to walk with the spirit.
Yes, so all the links that are for Alisa will be in the description of this podcast. So guys, we talked a lot about fears, traumas, trying to become your better self. And one of the ways to do that is to actually get yourself into shape, because my take on it is that you start with the body. So if you would like to level up in all areas of your life, grow mentally, physically, and spiritually, and you would like to get into the best shape of your life, you can hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 or my name, Todd Cave, on Facebook. Send me a message. Let's have a chat and see if you're a good fit for the Compound Body Training Army. And if you are on a spiritual journey or you would like to start a spiritual journey and you would like some help removing some fears and traumas, I can help you to do that. If you reach out to me, I can help you to get some magic mushrooms. And just hit me up on my Instagram at Adriano_246 or my name, Todd Cave, on Facebook, because psychedelics are one of the tools that I use personally to help overcome a lot of fears and traumas. Alisa used it as well, and I know that you will get great value from it. If you would like to support this podcast, you can do that by visiting our merch store. We have some cool tank tops, hoodies, shirts, and sweats. Link will be in the description of this podcast. And the store is called Todd and Me. And we have Christmas is coming up, so we have some really great. So we have some new designs in there as well. So visit our merch store, and if you do get any of our merch, just send us a message on Instagram or Facebook. Tag us if you want, and we will show you on one of the podcasts and or tag you in our stories on social media. So also, if none of those things resonate with you, but you would also like to support our podcast, you can do that by becoming a member of our Patreon or our locals community. You can get early release episodes like episodes like this will be released early when they come out, and you can get one-on-one with me because I get tons of messages, and sometimes it takes me a couple of weeks to get back the messages, but all my patrons and people on my locals will get first dips on me and my time, and you also get to support the podcast. And the perk as well is that none of the episodes there are have any ads on them because the podcast platforms all have ads. So visit our Patreon or locals page and become a member. You also help us out with things like editing of this show, and you help us to spend some time to get some other great guests like Alisa. Alisa, thank you so much for sharing your story, your wisdom, and your courage to walk through trauma and emerge with medicine for the rest of us. Your work reminds us that the path to healing is not just possible, it's necessary. And it starts with facing what we've been avoiding. To everyone listening, take a moment after this episode to reflect on your own journey. Share this conversation with someone who needs it. Subscribe to the podcast so you never miss a guide on transformation, and follow Alisa through the links in the description to continue learning and healing. This has been another episode of the Conscious Man 7 podcast, the place where we help you face the truths, reclaim your power, and step into the fullest version of yourself. You are the help that you've been looking for. So remember, folks, keep smiling, keep shining, and keep being the change you want to see. Thanks a lot again for being a guest on the show, Alisa. This was an awesome conversation. And remember, guys, keep practicing all these things, because change only happens when you actually make change yourself. Speak to you soon. Cheers and namaste.